Hey guys, I'm Crystal, and I am back with part 4 of Trooper Proctor's text messages and continued cross examination. And we are still diving into why I believe this case has gotten bigger than Karen Reed. This case is now about the integrity of our judicial system. Let's jump right in where we left off on part 3.
We've established that you're very close with your sister, Courtney, correct?
Correct.
You provided your sister with updates on important advancements during the course of your investigation into this case. Did you not periodically?
I made her aware of newsworthy stuff.
That started as early as January 29th, 2022. Is that right?
Don't know the exact date or content.
Well, the day of the incident, you began letting her know that you were involved, that you had been assigned, what the status was,
Yes.
the nature of the case,
Correct.
that it was a homicide, correct?
Yes.
Matter of fact, you discussed who the players were, who the people were that were involved. Isn't that right?
I just mentioned Julie and Chris were out earlier in the evening.
So you mentioned the Alberts, correct?
Julie and Chris, yes.
You also mentioned the McCabe's too, didn't you? At some point.
Yes.
Yeah. At 2668, Your Honor, that's the page that I'm referring to. You write homicide, correct?
So I said 2668?
Correct. I have my page number correct.
You're on the right page, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
You wrote the word homicide. Is that right?
Yes.
You were describing to your sister the nature of the case that you are now assigned. Is that right?
Correct.
She wrote the Canton thing is a homicide, and you wrote don't say a word to anyone. Correct?
Correct.
And then she wrote of course not. Is that right?
Yes.
And then you wrote what?
In the very least, it's suspicious.
In the very least, it's suspicious. Correct?
Correct.
So at that time, at least at the time that you wrote that text on the 29th at 3:05 in the afternoon, you believed that the case was suspicious, right?
It was before we found significant pieces of evidence.
So you believed that it was suspicious that it may involve the Alberts, right?
Absolutely not.
She then writes, this is your livelihood, didn't she?
She did.
Meaning this kind of case could make or it could break your career, right?
Objection.
Assisting.
She then wrote, I would never mess with that. Is that right?
Yes.
Your sister, Trooper Proctor, was warning you that you shouldn't be investigating a case in which close friends or family members were involved.
Objection.
Assisting.
Did you take her text, this is your livelihood, I would never mess with that, as a warning from her that you shouldn't be investigating a case that involved close friends?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Absolutely not. That was in response to don't say a word to anyone. And that was how I interpreted this is your livelihood. I would never mess with that.
A couple of minutes later, 3:07 on January 29th, you told your sister, quote, Julie and Chris were at the bar with the victim and girlfriend. Got to interview them. Is that right?
Yes.
So you were telling Courtney, your sister, updates on what your investigation advancements were, correct?
Just
You're
that
gonna
part.
interview, why you're going to interview them.
Yes.
She wrote, you got to be kidding me, correct?
Correct.
Did you take that as you got to be kidding me? The Alberts are involved? And
No, absolutely not.
then you wrote, it's not a big deal, correct?
Correct.
And then she wrote, I bet I know the person. Sounds like it is, meaning it is a big deal, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure what she meant with those messages there.
But she did write, I bet I know the person, didn't she?
She did write that, yes.
And you know she's very close with the Alberts, correct?
And she's close with Julie and Chris.
You then wrote, no, I meant, or you wrote not. I think you meant no. I meant that they were at the bar with them, correct?
Yes.
She writes, yeah, I got that part. And then she continues on, but I know a lot of their friends, correct?
Yes.
Did you see a problem in this exchange?
Nothing jumped out at me.
Your sister's literally explaining that your family friends are suspects or possible suspects in a murder investigation that you're in charge of, correct?
Objection.
Assisting.
On January 30th, 2022 at 9:13 in the morning, your sister texted you again, quote, Jesus Christ. The party was at one of the Alberts, correct?
Yes.
And you two were discussing the fact that, to put it in her words, Jesus Christ, these are our friends, right?
Objection.
Assisting.
How did you take her Jesus Christ? The party was at one of the Alberts with 2 exclamation points. How did you take that?
That's the way I'm interpreting my sister's text messages was that surprised, shocked that this is where Mr. O'Keefe was found on the front lawn of that residence.
Could it be, Jesus Christ, we know these people?
Again, that's how I read that message.
You don't deny, Trooper Proctor, that you were routinely disclosing to your sister pretty intimate details about the investigation, correct?
I wouldn't say intimate. I'd say newsworthy stuff or just generic, nothing too specific.
Newsworthy, would you have gone to the news at this point in the investigation? Would you have gone to the news and said, Julie and Chris were at the bar, I got to go interview them?
Objection.
Allow that. Is that what you do, Trooper?
No, I would not do that, sir.
So it's not newsworthy. These were details, internal details about the investigation, weren't they?
Yes.
And you were sharing them with your sister, Courtney Proctor, correct?
Correct.
And Courtney Proctor's best friend is Jillian Daniels, and one of her closest friends is Julie Albert, right?
Correct.
Then on February 1st, 2022, your sister texts you that she's actually meeting with Julie Albert, didn't she?
Yes.
And that was before you ever interviewed Julie, correct?
Yes.
So it appears that Courtney was providing information to Julie of some sort before you were able to actually interview her. Is that right?
Objection.
Sustained.
Let me ask it this way. You don't deny that Courtney was meeting with Julie before you interviewed her, correct?
Correct.
And you don't deny that you had been providing information about the case with Courtney before you interviewed Julie, correct?
Provided information that Julie and Chris were at the waterfall and I needed to interview them. Yes, that's the information I shared.
And who knows what you shared verbally, not in text messages, correct?
Objection.
Did you, we have text messages, Trooper Proctor. Did you share other information on phone calls with Courtney?
No.
So the only information we're to believe, you talk to her 5 to 6 times a day. The only information that you claimed you shared with Courtney about the details of the investigation are contained in these texts which we have.
Objection.
I'll let you answer that. Can you answer that?
The information that I share with my sister contained within these texts, yes.
You never discussed this case verbally, over the phone or in person with Courtney.
On the phone, I'm sure there's been conversations that's things that have been newsworthy items that have gone to the news. There's definitely been conversations in that regard.
Then before,
Don't you just wonder what some of those conversations were? Because based on some of these text messages, I bet when they were talking on the phone, there was a lot more than just, quote, newsworthy things that they discussed. Sure wish we knew what that was, but all we're left to do with that is speculate. And to be fair, we should not speculate.
before you ever interviewed Julie, your sister informed you that Julie actually wanted to get you a gift for your participation on this case, correct?
Yes.
In tab 5, let's turn to page 2672, Trooper Proctor. With court's permission, may we publish?
Yes.
Page 2672. You see the text from you, what's up?
Yes.
And what's Courtney Proctor's response?
Nothing. I just saw Julie, and she said, when this is all over, she wants to get you a thank you gift. And I respond with, get Elizabeth one.
Hang on just a second. Let's take them one at a time. You were asked about this on direct examination by Mr. Lowell, right?
Correct.
And you looked at the jurors, paused, and said, I never asked for a gift. I never received a gift. Elizabeth never asked for a gift. She never received a gift. Remember that?
Correct.
You said you never asked for a gift, correct?
Correct.
What's your next text?
Get Elizabeth one.
Get Elizabeth one what?
Referring to a gift.
Right. So you did, in fact, ask for a gift, didn't you?
For my wife, who had been home with my children for the last 10 nights.
From Julie Albert
Yes.
for your participation on this case.
I don't know if that's yes.
Well,
Okay, I really got to give props to Alan Jackson for that, because the first time I listened to this, and even the second time when I did my part one of this, when I got to this part, both times my thought was, of course you didn't get a gift because it's not over yet. Because she says when this is over, she wants to give you a thank you gift. And so my thought was, when he started saying, I never received a gift, my wife never received a gift, I never asked for a gift, all of that, my thought was, yeah, because it's not over yet. I mean, we're at trial now, so it's not over yet. So I got to give props to Mr. Jackson for this, because I totally let that go over my head that, yes, he did ask for a gift for his wife. I mean, his response was basically asking for a gift for his wife. And then you just heard him admit, yes, he did ask for a gift for his wife because she'd been at home with the kids.
Courtney Proctor answers that question by saying, because I guess her and Chris were friends and John, and she's so proud of you for leading this investigation, correct?
Correct.
You're aware during the course of your investigation, well, let me ask it this way. Let me ask a foundational question. Do you pull phone records? as a matter of course in investigations of this nature?
Yes.
Did you pull phone records in this case, variously?
The phone records of
Anybody, witnesses, suspects,
not witnesses, Mr.
individual people, whatever.
We didn't pull full phone records of witnesses. Victim and Miss Reed.
During the course of your investigation, did you become aware that there were 67 calls between Julie Albert and your sister, Courtney, in the months following John O'Keefe's death?
Objection.
I'm going to sustain that objection.
Did you become aware during the course of your investigation of the level of communication between Julie Albert, one of the witnesses on the case, and your sister?
Objection.
I'm sustaining that objection. You can come try and convince me otherwise if you want, Mr. Jackson.
I can ask it a different way, Your Honor. Thank you. Did you ever seek information about phone calls and communications that Julie Albert may or may not have been having with anybody else?
No.
Didn't download her phone, didn't seek her phone records?
No.
Did Courtney ever tell you that she had consistent communications with Julie Albert? Or did you know that otherwise?
Objection.
During the months, let me ask it this way, during the months following John O'Keefe's death, you did continue to have consistent communications with Courtney though, didn't you?
Yes, I speak to my sister every day.
Trooper Proctor, were you using Courtney, your sister, as an intermediary between you and Julie Albert?
Absolutely not.
You were well aware from the very beginning of your investigation that Colin Albert was, in fact, at 34 Fairview on the night in question, right?
Yes.
Matter of fact, you testified at the grand jury, the state court grand jury on this case, that you knew that Colin Albert was at the location, right?
Yes.
Did you make any concerted efforts to keep Colin Albert's name out of this investigation?
No.
Why is it, Trooper Proctor, that Colin Albert's name fails to appear in a single police report until July 18, 2023?
Colin Albert was not at the home. He left at approximately 12:10 a.m. before anyone from the waterfall had arrived back there.
Let's look at.
But I go back again to how does he know that? He is stating that as fact when in reality, he doesn't know that as fact. That is based on him believing every word anybody from the Alberts family or anybody from the McCabe family had to say. That's him believing them without doing real interviews, without looking for any corresponding evidence to back up what they're saying. Isn't that a good reason to investigate? So that you can back up what these witnesses are telling you? Isn't that how it normally works? You interview witnesses and then you look for corresponding evidence to either confirm what they say is true, or you come across the evidence that you're like, okay, well, that wasn't true. So we can't mark them off yet. We need to do more investigating. I mean, isn't that how it is supposed to work? I mean, it just seems, had you done that corresponding investigation and checked all these boxes, maybe, just maybe, because I don't know who did it. I don't know if Karen Reed did it. I don't know who did it. But maybe had you checked off all those boxes, we could at least follow your investigation and go, okay, he checked that out. He confirmed this. And here's the proof as to why that checks out. He did not do any of that. Ugh. This case is going to make me crazy, as I'm sure it is everybody. Probably all for different reasons. My reason is I followed wrongful convictions for years. It's really only been in the last couple of years that I had to back away from it because it was affecting me mentally, because it is so sad. And sometimes it just happens that the investigators do everything right. Everybody has done everything right, and the jury just gets it wrong sometimes. That's the human element to our judicial system. It happens, and it sucks because it takes years for these people, if ever. Some never do, but it takes years for them to get relief. You know, we've seen people walk out and prove actual innocence. That's what drives me crazy about this investigation is how that happens. This is how people spend 10, 20, 30 years in prisons for a crime they didn't commit. Once you are found guilty, then yes, you have to prove your innocence. Getting an appeal is hard. It takes years, if ever. That is where my anger comes from in this case. That is why I believe this case got bigger. I believe this case, while yes, it's about Karen Reed, and I do not want to take anything away from her by saying this, but in my opinion, this case is bigger now. It is about the integrity of our judicial system, because without that integrity, what does it mean? Without the integrity of our judicial system, there is no trust in it. And we all know over the last several years, the trust has gone down. So when you see things like this, what does that do? Yes, this case angers me. And it angers me not just for Karen Reed, but for all of the people that have been sent to prison for crimes they didn't commit, because it happens. We should be striving to do better, always striving to do better, because it's never going to be a perfect system. The human element means it will never be a perfect system. In the majority, almost all cases, the jury does get it right. I will admit that, but there are those that they get wrong, and it's those that this case angers me, because had they done their job, had he done a proper investigation, checked all the boxes, did all the interviews, if they had looked for evidence to confirm what they're saying is correct, if they had done all these things, then there wouldn't be the questions we have now. This prosecution has been going for 23 days at the time of this video with Proctor. 23 days in on the prosecution's case. We have not even gotten to the defense's case yet, and there is reasonable doubt everywhere. They always say the defense's job is to poke holes in the prosecution's case. Well, the prosecution didn't just leave holes, they left gaping boulders. So the defense is driving a truck through all of these gaping holes that they left. That is their fault. You know, there is a lot of people back and forth that really believe she's guilty. And these people probably know a lot more about this case than I do. It sounds like a lot of them have been following it, watched all the pretrial hearings, and they went into this trial with a preconceived notion that she is guilty. Okay, I don't agree, because the only evidence you should be able to consider is what is in the trial. Let me say this. The only evidence the jury is allowed to consider is what is brought into the trial. That's it. They are not supposed to consider any of this outside noise. Based on that, there's so much reasonable doubt. That's the problem. And that's where my anger comes in. Because right now, it just seems like this entire trial has been a waste of everybody's time and money, because I don't even know why she's on trial. They haven't even shown me that she was the one that backed the car over him. We don't even have a cause of death. I mean, we've been through all this, so I will hush now and let us keep going, finish up Proctor, and move on.
Obviously, part of the job of an investigator is to be as complete and thorough as possible, correct?
Yes.
You don't just take someone's word for something. You look for corroborating evidence, don't you?
Yes.
Matter of fact, you wouldn't take a witness's word for almost anything in a reasonable investigation, would you?
Objection.
Would you? So you can have that.
If I find that witness to be credible and have no reason to lie, then yes, I would take their word.
Would you try to support a witness's statement, or witnesses with an apostrophe, S apostrophe, their statements with corroborating evidence?
Yeah, potentially.
That corroborating evidence might be talking to other witnesses, right?
Yes.
It might be looking at cell phone data, correct?
Correct.
It might be looking at geolocation data, correct?
Yes.
You're trying to find out where someone is. You might pull information from their phone concerning geolocation data, right?
Yes.
You might pull cell tower information, right?
If there's a need for it.
There's myriad ways that you can find out whether someone's telling the truth about where they were and when they were there, right?
Right.
Let's take a look at your handwritten notes from your interview with Juliana Nagel on October 5th, 2022. This should be tab 7. Oh,
What is it for identification?
my mistake. I thought it was in the tab. It's not. This is a 3-page document. I'll just refresh his recollection with this.
Okay, show
but-
Mr. Lally and then go ahead.
Of course. Let me ask a foundational question, Trooper Proctor. Do you remember exactly what's in your notes from a conversation that you had on October 5th, 2022?
I don't know.
Do you think it would refresh your recollection to take a look at your handwritten notes?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Take a look at that. First, let me just ask you if that refreshes your recollection.
It does, sir.
Are those your notes, your handwritten notes from this, at least partially from this investigation?
Yes.
Does that reflect your handwritten notes based on a conversation that you had with Juliana Nagel on or about October 5th, 2022. Mariana,
Yes.
is this going to be an accurate representation or an accurate copy of your notes from your interview with Juliana Nagel?
Yes.
With course permission, I changed my mind. I would like to have this marked as next.
Introduced into evidence?
Correct.
Is there an objection?
Yes, Your Honor.
And the objection sustained.
Is it true that in your handwritten notes, you list the following individuals based on Juliana Nagel's conversation with you as being at 34 Fairview? Brian, Juliana, Mary Kent, Emily Fabiano, Courtney Alba, Colin Albert, and Sarah Levinson. Correct?
Correct.
You then drafted a report memorializing your conversation with Juliana Nagel, correct?
Yes.
And that report is a formal memorialization of your interview based on your investigation, correct?
Yes, a summary of the conversation for the interview.
And that report is the thing that's turned over to the Commonwealth, correct?
Yes.
And the report is the thing that's entered into discovery and provided to the defense.
Correct.
And isn't it true that in that report, you list the individuals that were at 34 Fairview as Brian, Mary Kent, Emily Fabiano, Sarah Levinson. Is that correct?
Yes.
What's the one name that was left out of your report on that list?
Objection.
I'll allow it. Was there one name left out?
So,
Break that down, Mr. Jackson.
Sure. Isn't it true that in your report, you excluded the one name, Colin Albert, from the list of individuals that were in your notes?
yes, because he arrived later in the evening. The other females were there from the start.
At the time that you wrote your report, the formal report, this one,
Mhm.
you did not believe that your handwritten notes were also going to be disclosed, did you?
I knew that was a possibility.
When you finally did get around to interviewing Colin Albert, you personally conducted that interview, did you not?
Yes.
Colin
Along with
Albert
Trooper
told
Zach
you-
Clark.
One at a time.
I'm sorry.
Finish your answer, Trooper.
Please go ahead.
Yes, along with Trooper Zach Clark in my office.
Colin Albert told you that he was picked up by Alan McCabe from his uncle's house at 12:10 a.m., correct?
Correct.
Alan McCabe also told you that she picked up Colin Albert at 34 Fairview at 12:10 a.m. and then dropped him off at his house, correct?
Correct.
And then she indicated that she went straight home after that, right?
Yes.
Did you conduct any further investigation to determine whether Colin Albert and Alan McCabe were actually telling the truth about that time?
We did not.
You just took them at their word, correct?
Yes.
Trooper Proctor, you realize you had a forensic image at the time. You had a forensic image of Jennifer McCabe's cell phone in your possession, right?
Correct.
You're also aware that she has a Life 360 app on her phone that tracks the location of Alan McCabe, correct?
I was not aware the app tracked her daughter. I knew of the Life 360 app, but I wasn't aware of the capability of tracking her daughter.
Did you bother to look at Jennifer McCabe's Life 360 app to determine whether Colin Albert and Alan McCabe were telling the truth about the time that they supposedly left 34 Fairview?
Objection.
Did you do that alone?
I did not.
We'll take a look at tab 8. Do you recall looking at all at a Life 360 app or its data from Celebrate Report?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you or did you not look at any data from Life 360 from Jennifer McCabe's phone?
Objection.
All right, so this is a good time to take morning recess, and I'll see Councilman Zaga. 15, 20 minutes. All right, Mr. Jackson, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Ms. Bonner. Trooper Proctor, did you include in your investigative file any Celebrite report related to the Life 360 app that was on Ms. McCabe's phone that you earlier testified to?
Trooper Garino was our cell phone expert, kind of handled that, so I'm not positive if that report, if he generated that report.
Okay, so it goes without saying, I shouldn't say that, because it goes without saying, I shouldn't say it. Did you review a Life 360 report in an effort to determine whether or not calling Alan Alley or telling the truth?
No.
You grew up in Canton, did you not?
Yes.
I don't want an address, but just generally as a crow flies, how close would you say you live from the Albert residence at the former Albert residence at 34 Fairview in Canton?
2-3 miles.
How about from the McCabe residence? Again, don't give me any addresses.
Maybe a mile.
You know, given the fact that you grew up in Canton, that it's about a mile walk through some woods to get to Canton High School from 34 Fairview, correct?
Yes.
Did you have any Canton police officers canvass the area around the high school or filling stations around the high school, gas stations around the high school for video surveillance footage?
No.
Did you have any conversations with anybody from Canton about video surveillance concerning the high school and or surrounding gas stations?
Yes.
Who is that?
It was Officer Galanis.
Can you turn to tab 9, please? First, let me ask you if you recognize these texts with any individual.
Yes, I do.
How do you recognize those texts?
That was a text communication between Officer Galanis and myself.
Taking a look at those text communications, do you see the inclusive dates of those on the face sheet
Yes,
document?
I do.
What are those inclusive dates?
First message sent, date and time, February 18th, 2022, 1:02 p.m. Last message sent, date and time, February 18th, 2022, 2:05 p.m.
These are texts on a single day, correct?
That's correct.
If you would look at page 2623. Your Honor, may I publish?
Is there any objection?
Same one, but
I'll let you publish it.
Thank you. Yes, you can. In this text, you're asking a member of the Canton Police Department to look around the surrounding area of 34 Fairview Road for camera equipment, correct?
I was asking if they had any knowledge of cameras in the area.
Okay. And of course, that was to an officer who was employed by which department?
Canton Police Department.
Which you knew at the time that you asked for assistance in February of 2022 had been recused from the case, correct?
Correct.
And should have no investigative involvement in the case, correct?
I had no request for them to pull video. I just simply asked, what are some good cameras in the area?
Which is an assistance for you in your investigation, correct?
They have more knowledge in the area as far as useful cameras. So yes, I reached out regarding cameras in the area.
Or assistance from Canton PD officers, correct?
Yes.
Whom you knew to be recused.
Yes.
Yes. You specifically asked Officer Galanis whether, quote, the high school had cameras facing the street, correct?
Correct.
And Officer Galanis writes back, the Canton Mutual gas station has unreal cameras. That's how I picked up that kid, and it had him walking into the woods by the new street Larkin Court, correct?
Correct.
You responded, good to know, I'll add that to the list, correct?
Yes.
Did any of the reports you turned over in discovery ever mention the Canton Mutual gas station cameras or the cameras from Canton High School?
No, because we did not retrieve any video from those locations.
And you didn't mention in your report that you even sought the footage from those locations, correct?
I don't believe so.
You did say that you would add it to the, quote, list. Is that right?
Yes.
And you're aware, obviously, as one of your responsibilities to maintain and keep your handwritten notes from all communications, all investigative activities involved in the case, correct?
Yes.
And you have no notes on this conversation, correct?
Correct.
As the lead investigator, Trooper Proctor, you are responsible ultimately for deciding which witnesses will be interviewed and which witnesses will not be interviewed, correct?
Like I mentioned yesterday or Monday, it's a collaborative effort within the office. So we bounce ideas off each other as far as what witnesses need to be interviewed, et cetera. So it's more of a group effort, a group decision.
But as the case officer, you make some of the final decisions on who's going to be investigated, who's going to be interviewed, things of that nature, right?
I facilitate certain areas, yes.
I want to talk about some of the witnesses that you interviewed in the days and weeks immediately following Mr. O'Keefe's death. You interviewed Brian Albert, correct?
Correct.
Nicole Albert, yes?
Yes.
Chris Albert?
Yes.
Julie Albert?
Yes.
Jennifer McCabe?
Yes.
Her husband, Matt McCabe?
Correct.
All those individuals are related in one way or another, either through marriage or otherwise, to each other, correct?
Yes, that's my understanding.
And you also interviewed Brian Higgins, is that right?
Yes.
I want to talk for a second about the individuals that you did not immediately choose to interview. Julie Nagel wasn't interviewed until October 2022, correct?
Correct.
That's 7 months after the incident, right?
Correct.
Sarah Levinson was not interviewed until October of 2022, also 7 months later, correct?
Correct.
Caitlin Albert was interviewed July 6th, 2023, correct?
Yes.
That's 16 months after the incident. Is that right?
Correct.
Brian Albert Jr., July 6th, 2023, right?
Yes, sir.
Ali McCabe, August of 2023, correct?
Yes, sir.
That's 18 months after the incident, correct?
Correct.
Heather Maxson, she was not interviewed until September 21st, 2023, 17 months later, correct?
Correct.
Or that's actually, my math is off, that's about 18 months later, is that right?
Correct.
Richard D'Antano, September 2nd, 2023, is that right?
Yes.
So you waited more than 18 months to interview him as well, is that right?
Yes.
And then Brian Loughran, snowplow driver, August 2023, 17 months after the incident, correct?
Correct.
I want to talk for a second about this last individual, Brian Loughran. He also goes by the name Lucky, is that right?
Yes.
Lucky Loughran. You testified under oath on April 21st, 2022 in the state court grand jury proceeding that no snowplow traveled down Fairview Road on January 29th, correct?
Correct.
Why did you say that, Trooper Proctor?
That was based off interviews with Mr. Trotter that the plows weren't out until they met up at 2:30. And then it was my understanding they were focusing on the main roadways.
You're aware that Michael Trotter testified in this case?
Okay.
Were you aware or not?
No.
Okay. You did, in fact, interview Michael Trotter, did you not?
Yes.
And isn't it true that Michael Trotter told you that, in fact, Brian Loughran was plowing 34 Fairview that morning?
Objection.
Is that what he told you?
I don't recall that statement from him.
Michael Trotter testified that that's what he told you. Do you have any quarrel with that?
Objection.
That's his case.
In reality, Trooper Proctor, you did not want to speak to anybody in the weeks and months following this incident who didn't fit your narrative, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it. Is that true?
That's simply not true. Absolutely not.
Certainly you didn't want to talk to anybody who could say that there was no body on the lawn at 2:30 in the morning. Is that right?
No, it's not true.
Are you aware that Lucky Loughran, in fact, did report that there was no body on
Objection,
the lawn?
Your Honor.
So the objection sustained. I'm going to strike.
Did you include anything in your investigative report throughout the entire time you've been in charge of this investigation about Lucky Loughran and his observations?
Not until Sergeant Mechanic and I interviewed him.
And that was when?
I can't recall the exact date.
And that was after the defense brought him to your attention, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Not true?
Correct.
Are you still the case agent in charge of this case?
Yes.
As a lead investigator and the case agent, you're aware it's also your responsibility and your obligation to investigate all potential individuals, right? All potential suspects.
Yes.
You're obligated to investigate anybody who would have a motive, a means, and an opportunity to commit the crime or the offense, correct?
Correct.
Motive includes anything from financial gain to just be revenge, right?
Yes.
Could be a lover's quarrel, correct?
Yes.
Or it could be someone who's interested in someone romantically, correct?
Could be an argument inside of a vehicle.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. Could you? What
I
was your
didn't hear
answer?
So, or it could be an argument contained inside a vehicle as well.
Yeah, which is the conclusion you jumped to 17 hours into your investigation, right?
Objection.
Oh,
Is that right?
It's something, evidence we have contained within cell phones reiterates that fact.
He had to think way too long to come up with an answer for that one because that was the conclusion he jumped to. Whether it was the right conclusion or not, I don't know. And the fact is, we may never know because he did not investigate.
When you decided that you were going to make sure that the girl, I think that's what you called it, the girl, was going to have serious charges brought against her 17 hours into your investigation, you didn't have any evidence whatsoever that there was an argument inside the vehicle, did you?
To go towards intent? No. But as far as the physical evidence goes, we have compelling evidence indicating Miss Reed struck Mr. O'Keefe with her vehicle.
So you just did
okay,
this.
Mr. Jackson, I just have to keep your voice up, Trooper Proctor, okay?
Yes, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
You just did this piecemeal. So when you decided that the girl, Miss Reed, was going to get serious charges against her, didn't have any indication of any intent, you just decided, oh, okay, I'm just going to go with physical evidence today. I'll figure out intent later. I'll figure out motive later, right?
Yes.
Motive, means, and opportunity. We've talked a little bit about motive. What about means? The physical ability to commit the crime, right? That's obviously important.
Yes.
And the opportunity. It's a physical proximity to the incident, correct? Or the
Correct.
physical ability to commit the crime, correct?
Correct.
Did you investigate all potential suspects who would have had the motive, means, and opportunity to kill John O'Keefe?
Yes, and that motive, means, factored in with the physical evidence pointed directly at Miss Reed. There's no one else had any motive. Mr. O'Keefe never went inside Fairview Road.
And you
He states that as a fact. Mr. O'Keefe never went inside 34 Fairview Road. He states that as a fact. And maybe it is. But how do we know that? We don't. Because he did not investigate that. He did not. Some of these interviews, 7 months, 16 months, 18 months later, after is when he's investigated some of these people. I'm sorry, not investigated, is when he interviewed. He never sought evidence to confirm he did not go into that home. Every time he states that as a fact, especially when he is talking about 17 hours later. 17 hours later, you haven't even had time to gather evidence to confirm that what your witnesses have told you is true. So stating it as fact, and that's why your conclusion was correct 17 hours into the investigation, doesn't match up, buddy. It just does not match up.
got all that, of course, from the Albertson case, right?
Yes.
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Let's talk about Brian Higgins for a second. You know that name?
I do, sir.
You personally interviewed Mr. Higgins, correct?
Sergeant Buchanan and I did, yes.
You keep adding other people into the interviews. I'm asking what you did, not what you and somebody else did. Did you personally interview Brian Higgins?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Yes, I did.
He's a fellow law enforcement officer, and you knew that, right?
Yes.
He was a colleague of yours, correct?
He worked in a different agency, yes.
You waited until February 10th to conduct a pre-scheduled interview with Mr. Higgins, didn't you?
Yes.
And you interviewed him in the presence of his attorney, correct?
Correct.
He told you that he was engaged in a flirtatious relationship with Miss Reed.
He did.
As a matter of fact, he told you that he was engaged in a flirtatious relationship with Miss Reed over text messages, but on at least one occasion that resulted in a kiss, correct?
Yes.
And then he also told you that he had taken the liberty to extract certain conversations from his own cell phone, right?
Correct.
And he brought you a hard copy of those text messages, right?
He did.
And you knew that those text messages were messages that he curated to give to you, right?
Yes.
He's the one that made the determination of what was important, what was not important to give to you, his interviewer, right?
Objection.
Was that your understanding, Trooper?
It was my understanding Mr. Higgins was being very forthcoming by providing those messages. It's not uncommon for witnesses to take screenshots or send us emails or send us text messages. So he just had a different means of producing text messages.
Well, you were actually asked that question in a different proceeding, under different questioning. And you were asked whether or not in your career as a law enforcement officer, has any person or witness ever brought a self-extraction of text messages to an in-person interview, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Correct. Most
And your answer was,
civil.
your answer was, Trooper Proctor, you had never experienced that in the history of your career, correct?
Correct.
So he does not interview Higgins until 11 days after John O'Keefe's body is found on Brian Albert's yard. 11 days after is when he interviews Higgins. And Higgins brings him text messages from himself and Karen Reed that he extracted, regardless how he extracted it. That's between him and his employer, figure out. But would you not find that a little strange that you're interviewing this guy and he went ahead and extracted some text messages to give to you so that you have them, instead of just going up there with your phone and saying, hey, this is what I got. Do you need them? Why don't you download my phone? I mean, if he's got nothing to hide, why go extract them yourself, risking your job and your friend's job for that matter? Wouldn't that have set off some alarm bells? And maybe it would have had there not already been this tunnel vision. I mean, because we're 11 days into it now, and he had already decided 16 hours into the investigation that it was Karen Reed. So 11 days in, I'm sure, unless it points directly at Karen Reed, nothing seems fishy to him. But I would have been asking a little more questions of Higgins. Why are you bringing me these text messages? Can we go ahead and get your phone? Or if he says no, okay, but you need to make note of that and possibly start getting a warrant for his phone. That's how you investigate. That's how you mark people off the list. Because I don't know if Higgins did it. I really don't. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But being able to check him off the list would have made everything much more clear when trying to convict Karen Reed, because then you can say, well, yes, we did. We confirmed. He was already gone when Karen and John got there, or, whatever. I don't know if he was or not. I don't think anybody's clear about anything because nobody knows where the Jeep was parked. There's been so many different testimonies on that, all from the prosecution's own witnesses. That's what's so crazy. Even the prosecution's own witnesses contradict each other. So all it took was doing your job. That's it. Just doing your job. Let's investigate this. Let's mark him off the list. But we need to have some evidence. We need to show why we were able to mark him off the list, other than, oh, well, he said John didn't come in the house, so we believe him. Don't we need a little more than that? Because without it, there is so much reasonable doubt, because the way this case has been presented, if I'm left wondering whether or not John went in the house, there's reasonable doubt. If I'm unsure of whether he went in the house or not, if I don't know, that is reasonable doubt. That is reasonable doubt. I can't convict her unless I know 100% he did not go in the house and that she backed her car and ran over him. I need to know that beyond a reasonable doubt. And because he did not do a thorough investigation, he did not interview these witnesses properly, even the ones he did interview. I said, I don't think they were interviews. I think they were conversations, and they were all putting into his head about how evil and horrible Karen Reed is, even talking about her medical conditions, because he had to get it from somewhere. So had he done all these things, we would have been able to mark all of these people off. That takes care of a lot of the reasonable doubt. Now, there's still some, because we got blood evidence in solo cups. We've got no chain of custody on any of the evidence. We got questions about the way the evidence was gathered. We have a lot of questions. But had he done this investigation properly, a lot of these questions could have been answered then, and we wouldn't have them now, because they would have been able to present a proper case. As it is, they haven't. We're on the prosecution's case, and there is so much reasonable doubt. I don't know what's going to happen when we get to the defense's case.
So you became aware pretty early on that Mr. Higgins at least had motive to want to visit harm on John O'Keefe, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
No, absolutely not.
Well, you knew he had this flirtatious relationship with Karen Reed. Is that right?
Yes.
You became aware that you saw the text messages. You became aware that Karen Reed actually ignored text messages from Mr. Higgins while at the Waterfall Bar and Grill with John O'Keefe, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Yes.
You were aware that at 12:20 a.m., Brian Higgins sent a text message to John O'Keefe, coaxing him to 34 Fairview, correct?
Objection.
I'll see you at sidebar on this.
At 2:20 a.m., Brian Higgins sent a text message to John O'Keefe, prompting him to go to 34 Fairview, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow that one. Go ahead.
I don't recall that text.
Do you recall a text from Brian Higgins to John O'Keefe after they left Waterfall? Where are you at?
I don't recall that one either.
You also recognized that Brian Higgins certainly had the means to commit the crime, correct?
No, I don't.
He's a big guy. Certainly had the physical ability to get into a physical altercation with John O'Keefe, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
Just because he's a big guy doesn't mean doesn't have the means or the motive to hurt Mr. O'Keefe.
I wouldn't ask
They were friends.
I wasn't asking about motive. I'm asking about means. Could he do it? Could he throw a punch? Knock a guy down, knock a guy out?
I can't speak to his fighting ability, sir.
Well, you've met him, right?
That one interview, yes.
Yeah, he's huge. Do you agree?
Objection.
Sustained.
He's a big dude, right?
Yeah, he's a big guy.
Bigger than me, right?
Yeah.
Bigger than you.
Yep.
You knew that he was former military?
I did, yes.
And he's a trained ATF agent, federal agent, right?
Yes.
And you were in possession of video surveillance from the Waterfall Bar and Grill, correct?
Yes.
And literally in the minutes before John O'Keefe's death, you saw video surveillance of Brian Higgins and Brian Albert taking fighting stances with one another, correct?
I interpreted that as horsing around.
I didn't ask you how you interpreted it, Trooper Proctor. I asked you if you saw it.
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you see it or not?
I did.
And what you saw was these guys taking fighting stances, correct?
Objection.
Is that what you saw?
Playful fighting stances.
But you waited until February 10th to interview him, correct?
Yes,
And you decided not to image his phone. Is that right?
correct.
You didn't ask for consent to search his phone or to take his phone, correct?
No.
You didn't seek a search warrant to get his phone. Is that right?
No, sir.
Did you know that on January 29th at 2:22 a.m., there was a call between him and Brian Albert that morning?
I was not aware of that.
Might have been important to your investigation, don't you think?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Depends what that. I don't know what the call was about.
Sorry, finish that.
I don't know what the call was about. I don't know if they actually connected and communicated what the length of the call was. So
Right. And you never asked, did you?
I was unaware that call took place.
And you were unaware that.
See, that's another thing. I was unaware that call ever took place. He is the lead investigator. How is he unaware that that call took place? What did he investigate?
Call took place because you didn't get his phone, Trooper Proctor, right?
Typically, we don't get witnesses' phones, sir.
You were unaware of that call at that time because you didn't see his phone, correct?
Objection.
Overruled.
Correct.
Right. The medical examiner notified you on April 28th, 2022, that the manner of death, in her words, could not be determined. Is that right?
Yes.
She would not rule, at least in terms of the manner of death, would not rule this a homicide. Is that right?
That's correct.
And you agree that that's obviously a pretty significant finding.
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Her finding doesn't alter how we conduct our investigation, whether if it's undetermined or ruled a homicide. We're still going to continue to investigate one way, regardless of her determination.
You obviously were not pleased with that determination. You were not pleased with that determination, right?
It didn't matter one way or the other because, like I said, we continue on with the investigation.
On April 28th, that same day, you received a text message from Trooper DeChico, correct?
Yes.
Can you turn to tab 11, please?
What's the ID number?
This is 2618. I'm sorry, tab 11
Triple
is
F.
GGG, triple G as in golf. May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
Do you have that in front of you, Trooper Proctor?
I do, sir.
You turn to page 2618. Do you see a text message received from Trooper DeChico with a photograph of the autopsy report?
Yes.
And that autopsy report indicates undetermined. Is that right?
For manner, yes.
In response, you wrote a text message to DeChico, correct?
I did.
What was your response?
Of course, it's undetermined.
And then what else did you write?
She was a whack job.
Of course, it's undetermined. She was a whack job, right? Those are your two responses, right?
Yes.
You were talking about Dr. Scortibello, the female medical examiner who came to the determination that this was undetermined in terms of the manner of death, correct?
I'm not sure who I'm referencing as far as she was a whack job, but the of course it's undetermined is a sarcastic response from me.
Have a moment, Your Honor.
Sure.
The reason you referred to Dr. Scortibello as a whack job is because the cut and dry case that you hoped for wasn't really going your way, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
When you referred to she's a whack job, were you referring to Dr. Scortibello?
I don't recall.
Were you displeased with the undetermined finding instead of a homicide finding because that was an obstacle in your investigation?
Objection.
You can break that down.
Were you displeased about the undetermined finding?
No.
Would you have rather had a determined finding that it was a homicide?
At the end of the day, it doesn't matter to my office. We still investigate the same exact way if it's ruled determined, undetermined, or homicide.
Well, then why would you say Of course it's undetermined. She was a whack job, sarcastically.
A sarcastic remark I made to Trooper DeChico.
Right, which sort of suggests displeasure rather than the reverse, correct?
Objection.
You'd agree that it's extremely unusual for the manner of death to be undetermined in a homicide investigation you've worked on, correct?
Objection.
How many murder cases in the history of your career have you worked on in which the medical examiner made the determination that the manner of death could not be determined?
Objection.
I'm going to allow that.
I wouldn't feel comfortable putting a number on it. It's not a lot. I couldn't ballpark it for you, but I know it's not a lot.
Well, Trooper Proctor, you were asked this exact question in February of 2024 at another proceeding.
Mm-hmm.
And you indicated that you had never seen it in your entire career, correct?
I'm trying to run.
Well, you were asked the question, so first, what do you mean by, of course it's undetermined? And your answer was, I said it at the time, it was kind of like, not like figuratively, of course, and of course, like I had never really seen that before in a homicide, end quote. Correct?
Yes.
Your statement in February of 2024, under oath, was you'd literally never seen that in any homicide you've ever worked, right?
Yes.
After she reached that conclusion, you discussed this with one of your colleagues about how you tried to put pressure on her to change her or alter her opinion, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it. Is that
All
what
right.
you did?
Pressure? Absolutely not.
Let's turn to tab 12.
What's this for identification?
This one, I'm just checking. This is HHH as in hotel. Your Honor, for this one, may I publish?
So I've got the mismarked. What's the bottom? What's the base
Sure,
stamp
it's
number?
2632.
Why don't you come to sidebar for
I'm
a minute,
sorry,
please?
the face page is 2628. Maybe that helps.
Okay.
Got it. Within that packet, we'll turn to 2632.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. To begin with, Trooper Proctor, do you recognize the face page of that series of text messages in tab 12?
Yes.
Is that the text messages between you and Trooper Chico, one of your colleagues?
It is. Yes.
Turn to page 2632, if you wouldn't mind. Tell me when you're ready.
Go ahead, sir.
Trooper Chico texted you, rookie move, not going into a meeting with the ME and getting that homicide determination, correct?
Yes.
How did you interpret that? Rookie move, not getting that homicide determination.
When Trooper DeChico, it's him busting my chops and joking with me.
Because you see it as your job, you and Trooper Chico, to go in and get the homicide determination. That's your job, right?
Not at all, sir.
You're not looking so much for her opinion as looking to give her your opinion, right?
Absolutely not.
You responded, Yuri and I, who's Yuri?
Sergeant Buchanan.
Yuri and I had 2 conference calls with her, sent her numerous photos, etc. We laid out the entire case for her. That was your response, correct?
Yes.
You were explaining how much effort you went to try to get her to change your opinion to homicide, right?
Objection.
Mhm.
No, not at all.
DeChico then responds, not good enough. Should have had me and Jeff do it, right?
Yes, that was his response.
Busting your chops that you didn't meet the standard of getting her to change her mind to make it a homicide, right? That's what he was busting your chops about.
We would never try to change the mind of a medical examiner. The doctor who conducts the autopsy often has questions. They want to know the facts, kind of what had transpired leading up to a victim's death. It happens not only in homicides, but the unattended deaths we also attend to, suicide and overdose. So it's common to have these conversations with doctors.
Right, but in response to getting the information that she made the determination and held on to it, that this was undetermined, your answer was, of course it's undetermined. She was just a whack job, right?
With sarcasm.
Ultimately, did the doctor change her opinion?
No.
But the determination of the medical examiner, that didn't matter to you, right? Because you had already decided you were going to charge Miss Reed with murder anyway.
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Yeah, the determination did not matter as we continued on with the investigation.
Notwithstanding the medical findings in the case, correct? That it was not determined to be a homicide, right?
Considering the manner, but
And that's because even though in the words of the prior group chat that this whole thing stinks, you were going to make it cut and dry by putting it on the girl, putting serious charges on the girl, notwithstanding what the medical examiner said, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
You were actually asked this question, whether or not it would have an impact on your decision, notwithstanding what the medical examiner's decision was, correct? Your decision to charge her. Is that right?
Yes.
On February 1st, 2024, you were asked, so what you're telling this grand jury today, and you expect this grand jury to believe that you didn't care whether the medical examiner came back with a homicide determination? It doesn't matter to you? And your answer, quote, no, because either way, Ms. Reed was going to be charged. Right?
Correct.
That's how you make a case cut and dry, isn't it?
Objection.
Sustained.
In other words, Trooper Proctor, to hell with the medical evidence, Karen Reed was going to be charged because that's what you had decided to do, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
I want to change gears for a second and ask you about some electronic data, specifically as it pertains to Jennifer McCabe. You're aware that Jennifer McCabe deleted texts and calls from her phone before she turned it over to you?
Objection.
I'll allow that. Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of that.
Are you aware that there were texts and calls missing from her phone before having that phone turned over to you?
I'm not aware of that.
Did you look at the extraction report, the Celebrite extraction report from her phone?
I have, yes.
And you didn't see the columns marked deleted, 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 deleted?
No, not that area, no.
No, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Not that area.
Not that area, meaning?
No.
What does that mean? I don't know what you mean by not that area.
I went through the Celebi report, but clearly I didn't review that tab.
So
He doesn't appear to be a very good investigator. He didn't go through that tab. So even when he did get some stuff, and let's face it, if it wasn't for the FBI, he wouldn't even have any of this. Oh no, Jen McCabe's he would have, because they had that. So I will stand corrected there because she turned hers over. Bet she regrets that. He's just not a very good investigator, apparently, because even when he has evidence, he doesn't see it.
as you sit here, you're unaware of whether or not multiple texts and multiple phone calls were deleted from her phone that you have in your possession?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Yeah, I'm not aware right now, sir.
How is that?
As the case agent, as the case officer, do you believe it might be important to find out whether or not that phone appeared to have been manipulated or altered in some way before it was turned over? Wouldn't that be something that you would normally do?
That'd be important.
But you didn't do it with Jim McCabe's phone.
I didn't personally handle that, no.
Did you ever seize Nicole Albert's phone?
No,
Did you ever seize Brian Albert's phone?
no,
Colin Albert's?
no,
Chris Albert's?
no,
Julie Albert's?
no.
Were you concerned that if you seized any or all of their phones, especially Colin, Julie, and Chris, that there might be some indicators that you knew them on those phones?
No, that thought never crossed my mind.
But the fact remains, you never sought to seize any of those, did you?
No, I don't.
And you never asked, irrespective of what you saw in the Celebrite report, you never asked Jennifer McCabe whether or not that was a complete and thorough, complete and accurate, I should say. Let me ask it a different way. Did you ever ask Jennifer McCabe whether or not she ever altered anything on her phone before turning it in?
I did not. Again, I didn't handle Miss McCabe's phone. I do the cell phone extraction on it.
I want to ask you about another issue concerning a potential conflict of interest. You were well aware that Canton PD was supposed to be, we talked about this at some length, conflicted off the case as of January 29th, 2022, right?
Correct.
And you can put it in that text message, NOCAT, it's total opposite. They have to recuse themselves, BPD. Same with Canton, right?
Yes,
Those are your words on January 29th, right?
yes,
And you knew that one of the reasons for Canton PD to recuse itself is because of the relationship between the Alberts and one of the detectives on Canton PD, Kevin Albert, right?
correct.
You knew that Kevin Albert was the primary source of the conflict, correct?
Yes,
And you knew that he, above everybody else, should be completely removed from any contact with the investigation or the investigators, right?
correct.
Yet when you wanted to coordinate witnesses for interviews in this case, who'd you turn to?
I texted Kevin Albert to see if he could secure a conference room for us to conduct interviews at the station.
The same Kevin Albert to help coordinate these witness interviews, who's the brother of Brian, right?
Yes,
If you could turn to tab 13, please. Your Honor, for the court's edification, it should be III.
All right, thank you.
It's in India.
Thank you.
Do you have that in front of you, Trooper Proctor?
Yes, I do.
If you'll turn to page 2591. With court's permission, I'd like to publish.
Okay.
Can you see that on January 30th, 2022, at about 11:55 a.m., Kevin Albert texts you on your personal cell phone, Paul G is reviewing the reports now. Steve Seraph is here if you need to interview him. And we can call Stephen Mullaney in as well, end quote. You see that?
Yes.
Who's Paul G?
Lieutenant Paul Gallagher.
So Kevin Albert, a Canton PD officer, and an Albert is texting you about Paul Gallagher, another Canton officer, about interviewing Steve Seraph, another Canton officer, and Steve Mullaney, a second Canton officer, correct?
Correct.
What investigation was Kevin Albert referring to in the text?
The death of John O'Keefe.
This investigation.
Correct.
Did you tell Kevin Albert it's completely inappropriate for him to be involved in this case at all?
I did not.
Did you tell him he shouldn't be having any contact with any of the witnesses? And he shouldn't even be having contact with you? Did you tell him that?
I did not.
What you did write back was, quote, okay, you and I are coming in at 1 to interview a firefighter, Katie, correct?
That's right.
So not only did you tell him that you were engaged in the process of obtaining interviews, you told him the name of the interviewee, right?
Yes.
And you were going to do it at Canton PD, correct?
Correct.
So you're sharing information about the identity of witnesses that you intend to interview with Brian Albert's brother, right?
Yes.
Then you asked Kevin Albert to actually contact the witnesses in order to schedule their interviews, didn't you?
Yeah, I believe it was Officer Mullaney and Seraph.
On page 2592. Kevin Albert texts, okay, so I'll get Mullaney in as well. You interviewing her here? And you respond, yeah, if we can line them up for 1:30 and 2, that would be great, correct?
Yes.
So you were leaving it up to Kevin Albert to contact and coordinate with the witnesses that you intended to interview at Canton PD, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Correct.
You then answered anytime in the ballpark. I'm sorry, yes, you answered anytime in the ballpark, then you went on and said from 1:30 on, correct?
Yes.
Kevin Albert then says, okay, sounds good. And then he responds, if you want to interview witnesses in the recorded room here, you're more than welcome. You see that?
I do.
He was referring to an interview room or an interrogation room where there's surreptitious recording devices, correct?
Yes.
That's to help facilitate memorializing interviews that police officers want to take with any witness in a crime, right?
Correct.
That would mean that if you used a recorded room, those recordings would be in the hands of which agency?
That's why we did not use that recorded room.
But he offered, didn't he?
He offered. We did not use it.
Did you see that as a problem?
That he offered?
Yeah.
No, I don't, sir.
You see that as a problem because he might, I don't know, take some of those interviews and forward them to his brother?
Objection.
Sustained. You can ask it differently, Mr. Jackson.
Were you concerned that Kevin Albert was offering to utilize Canton's recording programs facility in order to get access to what the witnesses were saying so that he could then forward that or tell his brother?
No.
Never crossed your mind?
Never.
While I completely agree with Jackson, it's completely inappropriate for them to use the recorded room at the Canton PD. I still want to know why none of these interviews were recorded. I mean, even with just body cam, did they have to be conducted there? I mean, the day of the incident, they went to the McCabe's house to interview her. I mean, why did it have to be done at the Canton PD? Could they have not facilitated somewhere else to conduct the interviews? And why were no interviews recorded? If we had recordings of all of these interviews with witnesses, we would know. Did they say Karen said, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him? Because from what I gather, from what I've seen, it was not in any of the reports. This is just something that came up later. And don't get me wrong, I am not saying every witness is lying, because memories are a funny thing. Sometimes it's not intentional, but you know that this has been playing on the news all over the local area. You know, just like the ER doctor. I don't know that he was intentionally lying. He seemed a little, I don't want to say arrogant, but maybe arrogance. But if you'll remember, you know, he just knew he put that in his report that in his report, he was told that it could be a car accident, that he was struck by a car. And he knew it was in the report. He just knew that. And so he gets a copy of his report and he looks through it and it's not there. And I don't necessarily think he was trying to lie about it. I think he really thought it was in there. And I think some of that comes from they probably heard coverage of this case, up to this point for what, 3 years, 2 years now, that they have heard continuous coverage about it. So, and I'm sure some of this has been on the news. And when he'd see it, he's, yeah, I'm sure he thought to himself, yeah, I was on this case, and he hears those reports and it implants memories into your brain. Memories are funny. Memories are a strange thing. So it's not that I necessarily think everybody was lying about it. I just don't think they knew. I think they thought because you hear something enough, then you believe it to be the truth. And so you might have think you heard that too. I don't know. I find it very hard to believe that if she did say that, it was not in any of the early reports. If I am remembering correctly, it was not brought up until till the FBI grand jury, which was, I believe, in 2023. I'd have to look way back into my notes on that, but if I'm remembering correctly, that is the first time the I hit him came up. And so if any of these interviews had been recorded, even, like I said, even if it's just audio or off the body-worn cameras, at least we would know, we would be able to confirm, because if it's in those interviews early on, then yeah, I could probably buy that she said it. That might be a little more credible. I might believe that, especially from the paramedics and stuff, but we have nothing. There is nothing. We have nothing. And I could not in good conscience send somebody to prison for the rest of their life off statements that other people made and contribute to her that we really don't know if she did or not.
Well, if it never crossed your mind, why didn't you go ahead and use the recording room?
Typically, don't record our interviews.
That's not what you said a second ago. You said the reason we didn't use the recording room is because of the obvious possibility that Kevin Albert and Canton PD could have access to your recordings.
Objection.
Sustained.
Didn't you say that's why we didn't use it?
No.
What was your answer, right?
No.
What did you say?
That we didn't use it.
Right. When I said, if you made a recording, it would be in the hands of which agency? Obviously, Canton PD. And your answer was, that's why we didn't use the recording room, right?
No, I don't recall saying that's why we didn't use the room.
You just said it to Proctor. It's been 10 minutes, been 4 minutes.
No.
You don't remember that?
Not specifically stated like that.
All right, let me ask you a different way. If you weren't concerned that the interviews could be compromised by Canton PD and Kevin Albert, why didn't you just use the room? It was offered up.
Again, typically we don't record interviews.
I really want to know why. I really want to know why they typically do not record interviews. I mean, as somebody who has followed a lot of wrongful convictions, these recorded interviews are so important. We gain so much from these interviews. There have been false confessions, and having the recorded interviews tells so much. I don't understand why we typically don't record interviews. I don't like that answer because, in my opinion, where we are at in this case now, I would question every case this man or even the department has worked on. If this is all standard operating procedures for them, and in their mind, they followed the book with Karen Reed in this investigation, I would question anything. And I have tweeted out recently that they are going to have to hire a whole new department just to investigate everything this man has ever been involved in. Every case that this man has ever been involved in, they're going to have to start investigating. Because if this is just regular operating procedures for them, if there is nothing abnormal about how they have handled this case, then yes, I question every case that he has ever touched.
With a cooperating witness, we just sit down with them, take notes. If it's someone we deem necessary to actually have a recording of, then we'll pursue that option.
Okay, guys, I think this is a good place to end part 4. And I will start back up on part 5, right where we left off. Thank you for listening again. And don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button so you'll know when part 5 comes out. And part 5 is going to be our final part to Trooper Proctor's text messages and cross-examination. Y'all have a good day. Don't forget to go out, spread some love, share some laughter, and avoid chaos.